Let's turn to semifinal number 2 in the Cotton Bowl. Jerry's World, AT&T Stadium in Arlington, home of the Cowboys, is where this game will be. The second semifinal, Ohio State and Texas. Ohio State 6-point favorites here, 53.5 the total in this game. Even though this is in Texas, where you would think there'll be a lot of burnt orange and Longhorn faithful, hook 'em, in the crowd for this semifinal on Friday night. You still see Ohio State a very solid 6-point favorite. There is definitely, without a single doubt, the last 2 dominant performances from Ohio State have influenced this line a bit. There's no doubt, because this line opened, as low as, it was 3.5, 4 for Ohio State as a favorite right at the end of the Rose Bowl when it ended against Oregon. That we saw Ohio State like 3.5, and then the opening number got pounded within the first hour or 2 after the Rose Bowl ended, and it got all the way up to 6.5, and we've seen it now trickle back down just a little bit to 6 here in this game. I'm one of the many that right away jumped on Ohio State at minus. I got 4. I didn't even get the 3.5. I got Ohio State -4. Because I figured the line was going to move. People were just going to be so impressed with just how incredibly dominant against an undefeated, unbeaten, terrific Oregon team, and just how Ohio State just picked that team apart and just annihilated them in the fashion they did. I figured that line's going to go up, and sure enough, it did. So I've got -4 in my pocket on Ohio State. But I will say this. It definitely feels like you're paying a tax now at 6.5, a little bit on Ohio State. And it's because they looked awesome. They destroy Tennessee. They get the taste out of their mouth of the loss to Michigan. And I was thinking, it's just coach speak, Ryan Day talking about. We had to have a meeting of the minds after the Michigan game. We had to have a heart-to-heart with our football team and come together and say, what's wrong? What was the problem with the Michigan game, and fix it. I thought, it's just coach speak. I got to see it before I believe it. Well, I do believe it now, because they look like a completely different football team, these 2 games against Tennessee and Oregon. I can't say enough how impressive they were, especially offensively. And it's simple. Chip Kelly finally came to the realization after that Michigan debacle at the end of the regular season, C-Mac. He came to the realization, we've got a fucking tremendous receiver in Jeremiah Smith. Maybe throw him the ball and throw him the ball a lot.
Throw it. That's how those first 2 touchdowns were, both like 45-yard bomb. I was like, that's what we talked about, I think, last week. Or they need to do that. That was huge. Yep. Huge.
He was stubborn. He was a stubborn guy for the longest time, Chip Kelly, as the offensive coordinator, saying, we're going to be a run at 3 yards in a cloud of dust. If it kills us, that's the way we're going to be. That's going to be our identity as an offense here with the Ohio State Buckeyes. And he finally figured out after the Michigan game, why are we running the damn ball so much when we've got this gifted 17-year-old freshman talent at receiver and Jeremiah Smith, who's going to be back next year, and he's going to be among the favorites to be the Heisman Trophy winner next year with the way he's playing right now for Ohio State. Why not use him, and why not let this offense be aggressive, vertical shots down the field, take them, and look what Jeremiah Smith can do with those. You just throw it to him. He's coming down with it. His size, his frame, his hands, his quicks in the open field. He's got the whole package as a receiver. There's no question. And it's difficult for anybody to match up against him defensively. Ask Tennessee, ask Oregon. He had huge games against both of them. Just outstanding. And, Will Howard is showing you let him throw the ball down the field vertically, not just the dink and dunk stuff he was doing all year. For the most part, especially that Michigan. That's another thing about the Michigan game. When they did throw the ball, they didn't take deep shots. None. It's just shocking that it took getting humbled like that again by your bitter rival to finally have a wake-up call and realize the way you should be game planning offensively, the way you should be scheming offensively, and the way you should be attacking with the personnel that you have at your disposal. And finally, Ohio State had an epiphany and a realization after that Michigan game that that's the way they should be playing on offense, attacking vertically in the passing game. Yes, you still run the football, and it's still part of the offense, but it's not 70-80% of the offense like it was in the Michigan game. You've got to be balanced, and if anything, skew a little bit more to the passing game because of what you've got there. Led by, and Emeka Egbuka is a great receiver. Look at the catch he made in traffic for the second touchdown in that first quarter against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. You got these great talents at receiver, both of them. Use them. And finally, Chip Kelly,
Yeah.
it got through to him finally to play this way. And it's almost like you have to cut the season right off at the pass after that Michigan game, because 2 games with this change, and it's a huge change, a huge shift in philosophy on offense for Ohio State. And it's 2-0 straight up in ATS, and they have been dominant in these 2 games. So for me, it's one of these deals where I'm happy with taking Ohio State -4. I love that bet. I love that number. 6 now. For me, it's still very difficult to step in front of the Buckeyes, but Texas isn't chopped liver. And you got Texas's C- game in the Peach Bowl against Arizona State. There are real problems, though, for Texas, and it's why I kind of took the early number with Ohio State in this game. They couldn't run the football, CMAC, at all against Arizona State in that game. That's concerning, because all of a sudden it made Quinn Ewers one-dimensional, and it almost cost them, quite honestly, the football game there. The defense, which I thought was just outstanding for Texas in the first half, because they really shut down.
Really the fourth. Like it was 24-8 with about 9 minutes to go. Yeah.
But what happened, I think the difference was, for as great as that Texas defense was in the first 3 quarters, because they contained Cam Scadaboo, which was the number 1 priority. He didn't really get much going. And yes, Arizona State moved the ball multiple times, but the red zone defense was just time and time again just tremendous. Stopping Arizona State on 4th down or holding them to field goals. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's the way that game went for the first 3 quarters for that Texas defense. But I think all those little body blows and the playing against the physicality and the physical style of a running back like Cam Scadaboo wore them down a little bit in the 4th quarter. And they had been on the field for a shit ton of time. Look at the time of possession. It was lopsided, way in favor of Arizona State. And you could tell that Texas defense just ran out of gas, I thought, in the 4th quarter. And that's suddenly when Sam Leavitt started making plays, throwing the ball. And all of a sudden the run game and Scadaboo's breaking off 10, 20, 25-yard runs now instead of 40-yard runs. And I think they just got wore down. Time of possession was way in Arizona State's favor, and Texas definitely felt the brunt of that, no question. But they were that close to being knocked out. It came down to 4th down in overtime, and sure enough, it's just got – and Kenny Dillingham said it after the game. Maybe I shouldn't have zero blitzed. And zero blitz is always a risk where you bring everybody and then it's one-on-one down the field. And there was Matthew Golden in the end zone to tie that game. And then Texas gets the touchdown to Helm on the next play, the tight end. And that was a huge swing, and Arizona State couldn't recover. Leavitt throws the interception, and that's it. That close to being knocked out, Texas, in that game by Arizona State. But instead, they somehow survive on their last breath, and they find a way to pull through in overtime despite blowing that big lead to Arizona State. But there are concerns. They couldn't run the ball. That's concerning with their offensive line, especially when you see the way Ohio State was able to get after Gabriel, not let, the Oregon run game really become a big factor in the Rose Bowl performance. And then on the flip side, I think the biggest matchup here is Texas's secondary, because you start to look at Texas's secondary here, these last 2 games in the playoff. Cade Klubnik throws for 336. That's Cade Klubnik, man, that did that. Not exactly a quarterback that was consistent or phenomenal start to finish all year. He threw for 336 passing yards against this Texas defense, even though Clemson lost in that first-round playoff game. And even with Sam Leavitt in Arizona State, knowing Cam Scadaboo and the run game's the focal point, Sam Leavitt still threw for 222 passing yards and over 296 passing yards altogether when you factor in the trick plays. So that secondary, I wasn't impressed and totally blown away by how well the Texas secondary played in the 2 games against Clemson and Arizona State. And now that secondary, C-Mac's got to go up against suddenly what has become a prolific, dynamic, almost impossible to stop passing attack with Will Howard to the likes of Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, and I'm concerned about that matchup big time. for this Texas secondary after what I've seen the last 2 games. So, like I said, Ohio State's got significant momentum. There was the one concern that maybe that Tennessee game where the vultures were circling. What's wrong with Ohio State? And they reeled it in and they were dominant. Even I had some questions. Was that just a one-off to get everybody to settle down after the Michigan game, or can they play that way again against a much better opponent than Tennessee in Oregon? And they did it. That was a statement. That was just start to finish. We're better than you, and we're putting our neck on your throat from Ohio State in that Rose Bowl. They're not an easy team to bet against right now, CMAC, but you are talking about now a little bit of a point spread tax, considering it was already adjusted for how impressive they were against Oregon when it opened at 3.5, and now you're seeing it all the way up to 6, and it was as high as 6.5 at one point. I'm okay with 4 with Ohio State. I will say this, if it hits to 7, do I have some interest maybe in a little buyback on Texas? I might, but it's, to me, I don't know if this matchup's going to work all that well for Texas, and I'm happy with the number I've got with Ohio State at -4. I'm keeping it for now. I probably will keep it unless I see 7 or more on Texas. Maybe then I'll look for a middle shot, but until that happens, I'm okay with taking Ohio State early in the process, early in the week, or right after the Rose Bowl ended at -4. I like this total over. I do. You've got to kind of look at Ohio State kind of as an over team now, because they're going for big plays. They're pushing the ball 30, 40, 50 yards down the field in the passing game. That's just a perfect recipe for overs when you've got a team taking their shots down the field in the passing game. And suddenly Ohio State is doing that in the 2 playoff games against Tennessee and Oregon, which, by the way, both games flew over the total. Meanwhile, you saw Texas's defense, CMAC, and I know they've got a week to kind of recoup after the Arizona State game, but they were on the field a shit ton. They got a little bit banged up in both the secondary and a little up front on the D-line coming out of that game. I know they lost one of their key secondary players in that game as well, Arizona State. Will he be back is a big question. And they were on the field a lot, and you worry if that defense is going to be as fresh as they need to be for Friday night in the Cotton Bowl against an offense that's clearly playing with great confidence going into this game. But I think Texas's offense can move the football a little bit here against Ohio State's defense. Keep in mind, Oregon, when they fell behind early, they couldn't stick to the run game, and Dylan Gabriel really had to become more of just throw the ball, and incorporating the run game is a big part of what made Oregon's offense so lethal this year. And once they had to abandon that, it made it made it easier for Ohio State on defense to defend this team. If Texas can at least maintain contact, keep it a 1-score game, not fall behind further than that, I think they're going to be able to maybe run the football at least a little bit better than they did against Arizona State. But I think the key for them is going to be, can they keep this game close and stay balanced? If they can do that, and one thing about Texas, they ran some tempo against Arizona State. They started to have a few of those drives where once they got a first down or two, they played fast. And you see a team that's getting to the line of scrimmage, snapping the next play quickly. It's certainly going to be good for your cause if you like the over as well. So I like over at 53.5. And like I said, I'm on a good number at Ohio State -4. I would just say somewhat be cautious now if you haven't bet Ohio State already, taking them at a number that clearly is recency bias in the number currently based on how just phenomenal the Buckeyes have looked 2 games in a row. CMAC, semifinal number 2. What do you think? Ohio State, Texas.
Yeah, I think on the number, it doesn't matter what the 4 unless we get to 7.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's that huge. I mean, of course, every point, numbers in games like this matter. I just think the 7 will be the key, which I don't know if it gets there. For Texas on the total, I kind of agree with you that there's going to be points. Like the only way Texas, they slow it down, they have to run the ball. They could not run the ball the last couple games. Georgia, they only had 51 yards, and they just had 53. And that was a problem of not putting away Arizona State. Like with them not being able to run and get first downs, they could have just killed that game, and they didn't. They couldn't. And next thing you know, Arizona State comes rearing back, and they did a great job on scouting. Then they hit the big pass play to him. Then he broke a long run finally, which they kind of hold him down. I think he had like a 33-yard run. They kind of got all going.
The trick play with Cam Scadaboo playing quarterback and throwing
that was right through the pass.
State going. Yep.
Yeah, that definitely did too. So is this another one where Quentin is going to be all on his back? Can he make big plays? I don't know. I mean, we've seen him, the good and the bad with him at times, but I think he could keep him definitely in this game. Ohio State, you hit on just the rematch, the offense clicking, the big touchdowns early. They just rolled the whole game. Howard looked really good. One thing we'll get back to him is 3 times against Texas, of course, K-State. I mean, he's on a different team now and all that, but 0-3 in those games, 566, 6 TDs, 3 picks. I just wanted to go over it since I looked back when he's played Texas. But he didn't have these weapons. You talk about, if you look at props, I would go to both those receivers. I mean, I think they could, Smith's around 84, 85, I think. That's only going to go up. And Ibuka's around 63, 62, 63. I think that, you look at their touchdowns, because I think they could have, it's a nice number on that, and look to them props in this one. But Ohio State, this is where their defense, I think, will come up big. Everyone that talked about, this is the best D line in front, and blah blah blah, and we didn't see it. The one success that Michigan had, they ran it a lot, but they still had like 175 yards. I know it was like on 40 carries, but it was enough. And then of course the Ohio State offense was great, and Michigan defense kind of stepped up, and of course that in the rivalry that it is. Well, Ohio State's got to be feeling good. I think it's a little bit too much love, but I don't know if Texas can run the football here. If they do that, they cover this, and it's a little bit lower scoring. Like if they can't, it could be rough for them. So I'm leaning, I'd love to see a 7 here. And I'm big Ohio State. I mean, it went from this, of course, fire Ryan Day, to these last 2 games. Like, holy shit, we win this. Now it's like, that everyone's jumping on his back. So it's everything's changed, in just 3 weeks' time. But man, it should be a really good game. And games like this, we always talk about, if you don't love something pregame, look to bet live. Well, everyone's going to eyes are on this, the live betting. If team jumps out and you like something, look that way on the side and the total. I think I always love to do that, especially if I'm not going crazy on a pregame bet here.
It's a key matchup. You're right. Texas's defensive line got after Arizona State for almost 3 quarters. Sam Leavitt was running for his life. He was having to scramble and evade the pocket constantly in that game. And Colin Simmons,
just got shook up.
Trey Moore, guys like that were just blowing up the line of scrimmage and getting after Leavitt, sacking him multiple times in that game against Arizona State. The one thing about Ohio State, and we have to give the coaching staff, especially on the offensive side, great credit for this. This was a team that was going through injuries, a shorthanded, depleted offensive line late in the regular season into these 2 playoff games, and this offensive line has taken huge strides. It's really sensational to see how well they played in spite of some of the injuries they incurred down the stretch.
I want to give credit to that kind of put these last few games, and I got to give massive credit. I just talked about the D line, the front 7, really. State, what they have 8 sacks, I think, 7 or 8 against Oregon. They were all over.
They were
Gabriel. So he hadn't seen that much at all. A little bit in the first game, but Oregon was at home, of course. So this could be, maybe even look at the sacks. That the front 7s look really, really good the last couple of weeks.
I think that's a great call. Whether it's Texas sacks, Ohio State sacks, or just the 2 teams combined, total sacks in the game over, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think, even though I think there's going to be points, there's going to be opportunities, I think, for the 2 defensive fronts to go after. I mean, you had 3 sacks for Texas against Arizona State, and you mentioned it, 8 sacks, and it was everybody. Lathan Ransom, Caden Curry, Cody Simon, Tui Omalau had a couple of sacks, and of course, Captain Jack Sawyer, the heartbeat and leader of this Ohio State defense, had a couple of sacks as well for them against the Oregon Ducks in the Rose Bowl. So the sack prop's interesting. The prop, I'm going to go, I like Riley Leonard, the quarterback run game for Notre Dame against Penn State. While he's not the runner and the athletic quarterback that Riley Leonard or some of the other quarterbacks are, I do believe for Ohio State, Will Howard's going to have to try to scramble a little bit in this game, because I think there'll be moments where he's going to be flushed out of the pocket and have to maybe run with it. Now, he didn't have to do it too much in the game against Oregon because of the way that game played out. They didn't get to him very much, and he had a clean pocket most of that game. But he might have to do it a little bit more here. And when you look at the two quarterbacks, C-Mac, that faced this Texas defense here in the playoff, Cade Klubnik for Clemson, Sam Leavitt for Arizona State. Look at the rushing attempts for both of those quarterbacks. Klubnik ran it 13 times against Texas in the first round playoff game. Sam Leavitt for Arizona State, he ended up running it a bunch of times as well. 13 rush attempts for 60 rushing yards versus that Texas defense. So both of them easily cashed their rush attempts over if you bet Cade Klubnik against Texas for Clemson and Sam Leavitt for Arizona State against Texas. So Will Howard rush attempts, I'm interested in that more so than the yards. He could get the yards too.
But I think you get the yards as long as it, and right now it's under 15. Like I wouldn't go crazy past that. Anything 15 below, which is right around now.
Yeah,
so I think it's around 14. I think it is pretty good there. You know, because he's definitely got the wheels to at least get out there.
He can move. Will Howard.
I mean, move. Yeah.
He can. No doubt. So I like that. Will Howard over rush yards, both of them. Split them up. I think it's a good chance to go 2-0 with those. I think he's going to have to use his legs certainly a lot more than he did against Oregon. Look, they had a big lead. It became
he didn't even run at all. Yeah,
no, he didn't really.
They were up so big.
The game was in such control. Like I don't see them blowing out Texas. Even though I like Ohio State to win in advance here, I don't think they're blowing out Texas. I see this as kind of a 6, 7 to 10 point win. For Ohio State, I think it's still a relatively competitive game.
Oh, last thing before we get out. Another thing with just when you're betting a dog and they have a horrible kicker makes me sick.
Bert Auburn, man. They have real issues with him. Real problems.
He missed it again. I mean, he's
that's another thing you got to factor in the back of your mind, especially if this is close. You got a kicker that's got the yips.
Stadium like that, going nuts, and he's just misses field goals like crazy. You missed a couple. I mean, yeah, so that's a big factor. I was thinking about that, but I wanted to bring up from earlier because after we saw the bad against Georgia, the misses, it could be rare, and we know how it comes to these big games. Field goals, like so, we've already seen it. So I gotta look at that too. That's a little bit. When I'm like, man, you got to put it on a guy like that. When it probably come up big, when there'll be stops, and he's got to make a kick. He just hasn't lately.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. For clearly, there's no secret Quinn Ewers who he's going to target in the passing game. So I don't want to even be creative here. Gunnar Helm, Matthew Golden, especially because, look, the guy they got from Alabama has been banged up. I thought even though he was out there that he'd be make an impact. He didn't look like he was fully healthy, and that's Isaiah Bond for Texas. So they've really become kind of a two-man operation in the passing game for Ewers. Matthew Golden is their deep threat on the outside, and of course Gunnar Helm, the great tight end over the middle. So don't overthink it. I think if you're going to target any sort of player props for Texas in the passing game, those are the two guys have clearly been the go-to guys for Quinn Ewers, Matthew Golden and Gunnar Helm going into this game for sure. So again, it's funny that his name is Bert Auburn, the Texas kicker, because I'm telling you what, if he blows this game for them or they lose on a kick he misses, they're going to want to ship him to Auburn, after this game. If he does another rough performance here, there's no question. And one more point on the total, because I think that's the best bet at the current numbers is over 53.5. I'm a little surprised the total's lower than it was in the Ohio State-Oregon game, because that total was 54-55. And this one's a little bit lower than that. And
I guess you're right a little bit. This maybe could have been, 55.
I thought we'd see this 56, 57. And I think you're still getting below those key numbers. I think you can get there like 30-27, 31-27, 31-24 even. Cash is a ticket. I think it's very plausible we get a score like that. in this game. And I still don't think there's been enough of an adjustment, at least for me, C-Mac, to the Ohio State vertical attack in the 2 games since the Michigan debacle. And it's not, to me, coincidence they've gone 2-0 to the over. And even Texas in the 2 playoff games they've played have also gone 2-0 to the over. The Clemson and the Arizona State game both went over. So you're talking about 2 teams that are 4-0 to the over combined here in the college football playoffs. So I thought the total could have been a little bit higher than it was. Is there anything you want to say more on this game, C-Mac?
Yeah, let's get out of here.
There you go. We're done. Good stuff. Shout out to everyone in the chat. We appreciate it. Hit the like button.